We keep on rolling now. The Pulse the Program series continues. We make our way over to Columbia, South Carolina. And the South Carolina Gamecocks are going to be on the mic today at SEC Media Days. We're going to hear from Shane Beamer, going to hear from Spencer Rattler. And the feeling within South Carolina, I mean, the vibes are high there as well. I mean, Shane Beamer is through and through a program guy, no other way to say it. And the way they finished last year has them thinking even better in 2023 if they can pick up where they left off offensively. And the trend has been steady for South Carolina since Shane Beamer's been there. They won 7 games in 2021, 8 wins in 2022. And so the pulse internally with that fan base is, okay, what are we? What are we here at South Carolina? And it's kind of the same as when you determine a relationship, right? You can, see some potential in someone and y'all can talk for a while and you can maybe go on a couple dates, but there's a certain point in time where you're like, okay, well, what is this actually? Because, dating is fun. We can go on a date, but, what are we going to be? We're going to put a label on this thing. And I think that's the same thing for South Carolina. If you're in that fan base, 7 wins is great. 8 wins is great. I mean, we were 2-8 before Shane Beamer got here. That's probably the approach from that 2020 season. That's the feeling you would have coming from that year. But now with that steady trend, you're like, okay, it's cool to win that many games. We're excited about that. But what are we going to be going forward? What are we going to be as a fan base? Are we going to be a team that wins 7 games every year, or are we going to be a team that takes that next step and we sneak up on a national title contender in Georgia early in the year? We go and win 9 games. We beat Tennessee for the second year in a row. Like what is the vibe for South Carolina? I think they're looking to find out exactly what that product is going to be year in and year out in Columbia. Appreciate everybody tuned in live. We talk ball here every single day. We're also on podcasts wherever you get them. Apple, Spotify, however you get down, you can find the hard count. So make sure you type in the hard count with JD Pickell, subscribe to that feed, and we'll just keep this thing rocking and rolling. Thank you so much in advance for that. Now, internally, the feel at South Carolina, I think the feel is the same as we mentioned with that fan base. As these things often go, there's some overlap there, but internally, they're asking the same question, but it's more of a future-thinking thought. What are we is the sentiment, but even more so, they're saying, what is South Carolina going to be after we leave? For the guys in that locker room. For a guy like Spencer Rattler, who's not going to be back at South Carolina after this coming season. What kind of legacy are we leaving? What is the foundation of South Carolina football? Because going into year 3, you now have, for the most part, your personnel, if you're Shane Beamer and how you've recruited and used the portal, you have your standards, you have your culture. Like the first 2 years, you're kind of trying to get it together and did a really good job doing that, did South Carolina. But now in year 3, it's like, okay, what are we? What do we want to be? What do we want South Carolina to be set up to be in the future? Because when it comes to what they've done the past 2 years, they're excited about that. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not what Spencer Rattler came back for. He didn't come back to win 8 football games. He came back to go and play for New Year's Six Bowl. He came back to have a shot at making some noise in the SEC. And if you think they're shooting for anything lower than that, you're out of your mind. That's not what Spencer Rattler came back for. That's not the standard Shane Beamer as a true competitor is holding his locker room to. And so what this depends on for me, what this comes down to for South Carolina, a couple of things. The first of which being, you got to be sturdy on the offensive line and the defensive line. Defensive line could not stop the run. Offensive line was not consistent protecting Spencer Rattler. And in the SEC, y'all, a line of scrimmage league, y'all know this as well as anybody else in the country, that is essentially like paying rent. To exist competitively in this conference, you have to be sturdy on the lines of scrimmage. No ifs, ands, or buts. No other way around it. That is the deal. Okay? That's step 1. The second piece of that is Spencer Rattler picking up where he left off at. Now, I mentioned the first part because I think it's more crucial to South Carolina long term, and I think you see a better version of Spencer Rattler if you protect him. But even so, man, he's not without fault. We saw a different Spencer Rattler the last couple of weeks of the season than we did September to October. It's just the way it was. Put the ball in harm's way, wasn't really making consistent decisions that were all the time good for South Carolina. Need to see him be consistent. Need to see him cash in. If you put a run game behind him and you want to protect him, I think you can ask whatever you want of Spencer Rattler. If you're going to equip him with the right tools to succeed, you then expect him to succeed because he's got all the arm talent. I mean, he was as highly touted as anybody coming out of high school in Arizona. There was a ton of buzz around him at Oklahoma. You saw him do phenomenal things in that New Year's Six Bowl game against Florida. There was a lot of people saying he was going to be the number 1 pick. A lot of people saying he was going to win the Heisman Trophy after that bowl game. One thing led to another. Loses his job to Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is a generational talent, like a whole other conversation. But the bottom line is you've seen what's under the hood with Spencer Rattler. You've seen the ability. You've seen him do it before. It's not just potential. There's some real life things that he's accomplished. But he has to be the guy to be able to capitalize for them to take that next step, to get over 8 wins or to get back to 8 wins even. Now, I want to make sure that we say this, though, for South Carolina as a whole. Yes, there's the question of what are we. Yes, there's the expectations that are high based on how you finish the year, and you love Shane Beamer. Couple of things I would say, though. I would not lose sleep over 2 things. The first of which being, do we have the right head coach? You have as good a head coach as there is in the country, in my humble opinion. You won 2 games before Shane Beamer got there. You've won 7 and 8 the 2 years he's been there. Overachieved according to Vegas. He's a guy that is going to recruit, which is the lifeblood of college football. Right now, South Carolina has 8 4-stars committed. Top 20 class. I expect them to climb. You have to do that in the SEC. Talent doesn't guarantee wins, but not having talent guarantees losses, in my opinion. So that's the first thing. The other piece of this is I don't think you lose sleep over what other teams in your conference are doing. Like, it does you no service to look at Georgia and say, man, we got to do what Georgia's doing. Or to look at Tennessee and, man, Josh Heupel put it together so quickly. How did they do that? Don't look at that. Run your race. Be excited about the fact that you have Shane Beamer and he is going to recruit his tail off and he's got a culture that is second to none. And the way you finished last year, I think, should be proof of what he's doing and what he's capable of at South Carolina. You got to take the same approach that we take on this very show. I mean, you can get caught up in any kind of rat race in your professional career, whatever it is. You don't worry about Jimmy from accounting. Jimmy from accounting ain't you. And when you lay your head on the pillow at night, Jimmy from accounting has got nothing to do with it. Okay, you run your race. You don't worry about Tennessee. You don't worry about Georgia. Don't worry about LSU. Run your race. Because South Carolina was in a different position than Brian Kelly when he took the LSU job. Shane Beamer at South Carolina, his first couple of years at South Carolina, not the same deal as when Josh Heupel took the job at Tennessee. There's different scenarios here, different rosters, different luck through the transfer portal. Run your race. But I feel extremely confident, if I'm a South Carolina fan, that we have got a guy to take us to where we eventually want to go. You're in it for the long haul now. You're building in the most difficult conference in college football. You're not building in the Pac-12. No knock on the Pac-12. I love the Pac-12. You're not building in the ACC. I love the ACC. You're building in an absolute gladiator-style conference where you got to bring it every single week or you're holding that L. And that's just the reality for South Carolina. So for the pulse of the program for South Carolina, they're asking, hey, what are we? Let's define what we're going to be if we're internal. That fan base, they're saying, what are we? What are we rooting for? We're rooting for 6 wins? Rooting to just get the over of 6.5 wins that Vegas is throwing at us? Or we're rooting for 8 or 9 wins? What are we going to be? As a fan base, what we're rooting for, and as a product on the field within that locker room and that coaching staff. But for South Carolina, man, I'm excited to see what they be. I'm a Coach Beamer fan. There's no other way around it. And I think he's going to be the right guy for them in the long haul. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.